I point it out now, but I can judge people's emotional intelligence by two things. Number one, how they park. And number two, the questions they ask. But it's not just the questions they ask. It's will they listen to the answers of the questions they ask?
Mm-hmm.
So maybe it's three ways. And I say emotional intelligence. I mean, some people are extraordinary, unique about that, but you get to really know somebody and they get to know you. I use the parking because parking is an awareness. When you're parking your car, where you park it, how you park it, it's a sense of awareness,
Mm-hmm.
and to some degree, in my opinion, respect to other people's property, right?
Well, it's so much, it's so many more, right? It's also perhaps their hand-eye coordination, which is not a judgment of any kind. It's just some people do it with ease, and other people
no,
need eight turns.
great point. Great
Yeah.
point. Yeah, yes, they just don't have the physical ability, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah. It's also a sense of courage or risk aversion. It's like some people just go sliding right in, like this is no big deal, and other people are like, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god.
see, I take it as they're being very considerate, or to some degree, they're oblivious and being inconsiderate, unknowingly, not intentionally, right?
Yeah,
But our home is a difficult place to park because it's an awkward, it's a long driveway and you've got a bunch of choices, and you can really decide how. So it's not that I hold them against them, although I probably do a little bit subconsciously, but when somebody's parked well, I appreciate it because then I don't have to go out there and tell them, hey, that's probably not a great if you just move your car. I don't want to do that. But don't put me in a position where I have to do that, right?
Yeah.
So it's just it's a crappy way to start off. Welcome to our home, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, the parking, we can have a whole podcast on parking. But my other thing just recently, again, is this: when somebody asks you a question, I will stop and say, first of all, thank you for that question. That is a very good question. And then it's not just asking the questions. How interested are they really interested in learning the answer? Because you can ask a good question, but if you're not willing to sit there and listen to the answer and then either ask another question or have a dialogue or that's so it's not just a great question. It's somebody that wants to get to know you better. At the same time, you want to get to know them better, but you do by the question they ask, the kind of person they are. So,
it's a very interesting topic. I talk a lot in my, career counseling work about active listening, about authenticity. And I think these are both, the real gift is the ability to be able to ask a really good question that you're authentically interested in the answer to.
Thank you for adding that.
Yeah. And then when the person begins to answer, you're only looking at them. There's no phone in play, there's no traffic in play, there's no other people in the room.
Yeah.
There's no distraction. And the answer is putting you in a position where you begin to kind of intensify and maybe even glow a little bit and maybe appreciate a little bit. And it's really, because that's a valuable conversation. That's a beneficial conversation for both people. And I think, with all the stuff in the world today, the social media, the phones, everything, the chaos, that's a much more difficult thing to do today than it was 10 years ago.
Well, so a couple of things you touched on, I think are worthy of diving into a little bit. One, these are face-to-face real meetings. It's not a Zoom call. It's not a telephone call. It's that. And you have time, right? It's a setting where we're going to spend some time together, whether it's an hour or 2 hours. And let's face it, a glass of wine or, whiskey or beer, that kind of lubricates the mind, and it loosens things up too. So, I'm a big believer in the spirits, the spirits of whatever that is. Not that you have to get plastered drunk, but it does loosen up. But I think the point you were making earlier, your answer is as important to what you want them to believe you are, who you are, but also you get a chance to rehearse that in a way that, now you have to, that's your story. So you're telling your quick story. And when somebody asks you, you get a chance to kind of do a rehearsal of that, or a description of that, of how you want. And of course, who else? It's not just a one-on-one conversation, right? There's two others that are listening to the same answer. One that has, my wife of 30 years, or been together for 39 years, has a depth of perspective about how I answer that question. Right. And of course, the other one that's been in our lives for the last, almost the same time, 35 years. Because again, they went to college together. But the question was, what's the secret to being married for 33 years? And my answer was, I don't think there's any secret. The answer is, well, my first answer to everything, and I think if you and I have talked about this, I think to answer anything with a blanket that it applies to everybody is also not very sincere, very well thought out. So I think when you answer a question, you have to look at it in 10-year increments, right? Your 20s to 30s, your 40s, your 30s to 40s, your 40s to 50s, and so on and so on. So my answer was, let's put this in context, because if I would to contribute one thing to our marriage for being married, I think that was his question. What's it take to stay married for 33 years? Obviously, they both had been married and divorced. They're engaged. I don't know if I mentioned that. They're engaged. They were there. That's the other reason we were there. We're to celebrate their engagement. They're getting married, so my answer was, I don't think we're designed to be with the same person into our entire lives. And even though that person was my wife, she also has a reinvention of herself. And I think that's really important to be expected. So I said, it can be the same person. It often isn't not the same person on a second marriage. And I was, the kind of the takeaway of the conversation was, and I love her. She's very bright, but also has a perspective. And she went into her first marriage. Maybe he did as much, but it was, you have to reinvent yourself. So even though we've been together all this time, you really are marrying a different person. If they're not different, if they don't change and evolve like we all do, then it's going to be hard to be with them. And sometimes the second marriage, you get it right. And that's what she said. She said, I would have done some things differently in my first marriage. And it's not wrong. There's nothing wrong. I was just reflecting, Mark, on your relationship with your girlfriend, how you're probably a better partner than had you not gone through that first marriage.
Yeah, I certainly, and I say this quite often, I certainly am a better dad, and I considered myself a great dad before. But the humility that comes from what transpired, and the sole focus on your children, because there's no other parent in the picture to handle that burden with you. Not that burden's probably a bad word for it's great work if you can get it. Shitty pay, but great work being a parent. But yeah, I think that topic that you've opened up is worthy of some investigation. I think one of the things that popped into my head, I wanted to ask you, kind of put you on the spot. Do you answer that question differently if your wife's not in the room?
I may have in the past. I think this one I was very deliberate, because it sounded off like it was going to be one thing, and I knew where I was going with it. It ultimately, it may have sounded off in first, like you're not supposed to be with the same person. Like, that's weird. We're together. And then it was really a compliment. It was a compliment that she, after, well, you were, this is a couple of years ago when we met, I was struggling with some things, and she was still working, and she had made a professional decision, but more importantly, a personal decision. She had kind of a breakdown, like we all do when you're overstressed, right? I didn't realize how much stress was playing in our relationship. So it's not that I call her my second wife sometimes. She's the same person, but without all the stress, and her courage and ability to say, you know what, I'm going to go out on top. And work is an addiction, right? Especially if you have a high profile position. There's a lot of dopamine you get off of your team and so on. And I think I gave her, well, a very nice compliment
Mhm.
that she was able to recognize that and said enough is enough, and then made a professional change. I didn't force her by any means. I didn't give her an ultimatum. I do remember saying, "Hey, something's not right here. You know, your work is becoming more important than anything before." Of course, we're empty nesters, kids were gone, and I didn't realize, you know, the toll that takes on people around you when somebody's working 24/7 and everything they do is way more important. This actually speaks to something too. I can speak to this. I obviously won't mention her name, but the conversation did roll into some really good stuff that she shared with me, and I shared with her. I said, look, men are pretty simple. We're pretty simple guys, right? If you think about it, compared to women. Women are complicated, and this is the perfection. This is not the imperfection, is as in masculinity and femininity, right? So you have to embrace the differences. And what we were saying was that I kind of lost my train of thought. What I know what she was saying. I was saying, look, we're very simple as a man. You know, we just in the beginning, our early ages of our life, we just want to be food and fucked, basically, right? That's kind of like, especially in your 20s and 30s, right?
Mhm.
As you evolve, we have other moments. And then she added something like about, yeah, you can do that, but also you need to be a friend and be there. You know, listen to them and care about them. And she kind of was reflecting on some things she would do differently, and how it's important for a woman to acknowledge their husband and to let him know that he's, you know, he's important and he's cared about. Because I think women have a tendency to do that, especially in childhood mode. Their kids are way more important, right? Everything else
Yeah.
is more important. And so I really appreciated her kind of stepping in and saying it's important for women to do that. And I don't think she was reflecting in a negative way. I think that's what she says going forward. That's what she's going to do.
Well,
And
it's nice. It's nice when anybody takes their experience and learns from it. You know, whether
absolutely.
mistakes are the cliche, the mistakes are the opportunities to learn. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's an interesting comment you make about, you know, you evolve into a different person
Yes.
as life comes at you and different things become important to you.
Yep.
Like the empty nest syndrome is a big deal
Yeah.
for a lot of people because most people don't see it coming.
Yeah.
And most people don't prepare for it. They don't talk about it. They don't talk because there's too much going on right now to be worried about what's going to happen 5 years from now when Susie goes off to college, you know,
Exactly.
or whatever. But
Yeah.
I also think a lot of marriages fail, and I'm not a marriage counselor. You know, I was going to say I fucked my first one up, but I don't take a whole lot of responsibility for that one. As selfish as that might sound, anyone who knows the story would be laughing with us right
Yeah.
now, Jim, and you know enough about it to be laughing.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it is, there's that you evolve if you
Do evolve.
seek, if you seek to learn, if you seek to get better all the time,
Yeah.
which is what I think we've kind of collectively started to define as success.
Yeah.
It's the search for meaning, the search for learning, the
Yeah.
search for growth. You're a
And
successful
search for gratitude,
everything.
appreciation, and gratefulness, which
Yeah.
takes a lot of work. I really, it's another one I keep saying, I say it often. We are either going to grow better or bitter.
Yeah.
It's a choice. And
No, yeah,
especially at our age, it's
it
a
is.
choice. It takes a lot more work and self-evaluation, self-reflection in order to be better. And it fades away quickly. So even if you do it temporarily, if you don't constantly remind yourself of what to be grateful for, you become that kind of grumpy, grouchy old person that nobody really wants to be around.
You
And
know, it is definitely a choice. It's a fork in the road that hits you
yeah,
somewhere in probably in your 40s or 50s.
yeah.
Everybody's probably different in terms of the time. The thing
No,
that
I think you're right. I do think it's mid 40s,
yeah,
mid 50s and
yeah,
60s. I do think there's like a 15-year period where you're going to have to make a decision. It's going to be harder to reinvent yourself at 80, or reinvent the way you view the world, your perspectives, at 75 versus
well,
55 or 65, right?
I talk about my dad a lot, and I think,
Yeah.
he's 94, and it was probably 2 years ago now I introduced him to Wim Hof breathing,
Yeah.
and he went online, clicked the link I sent him, went through the exercises, and when he finished, he immediately called me up and said, "That was fantastic.
That's
I'm
cool.
going to make that a habit."
Yeah. Well, he's a
I
learner too. So
I
that
have
learning
seen,
makes you, keeps you young as well. Keeps the mind going. Yeah.
I've got a really good example of a guy who evolves. He constantly evolves, and he's also the great listener, man. He asks great questions. My daughter and I were just talking about a great friend of mine who she just had dinner with because they crossed paths in North Carolina, and they've known each other for a while. It's really nice when one of your good friends has a friendship with one of your kids, that they can exist without you even being there, and they're buddies, you know. And they were talking, she was saying how my friend was like so thoughtful and so interested. He remembered every detail from our last conversation. He asked me about this, he asked me about that. And I said, well, he's a really genuinely nice fellow. He's authentic. And she said to me, well, that's why he's your friend, Dad. And I thought that was kind of nice, you know. But yeah, you see it all the time, Jim. You see couples that are like, okay, well, she's evolving and he's not, or he's evolving and she's not, and they're not communicating about that, and the gap just grows. It just grows. It becomes inevitable at some point.
It does. Yeah. And I know when, we kind of got into a little more into the details of our relationship over the last, I don't know, 10 or 15 years. But yeah, I think when she obviously had a structured corporate job and a position, I had my own business for many years. I decided to do a pivot, do something different. It doesn't manifest itself the way I'd hope it would. So there was some disappointment on that. That's part of taking risk, right? As an entrepreneur. And so it was coming into grips or to terms with that, along with her change. And so that was the final answer. It was a compliment. And that, you know, we definitely, you have to reinvent yourself to some degree at any age and be interested, have independent things. Otherwise the relationship will grow stale and old.
It's in terms of the better or bitter comment that you made, I'm reflecting on it as you're talking. And I always found myself, whenever I got to a point, no matter how old I was, and this is probably my upbringing, it's probably some of the self-work that I've done, it's probably the friends that I have, everybody gets some credit for this, is like, bitter is not an option for me. It never has been. I refuse to allow that to be an option for me. It was like, because I've seen the guy, when you're playing golf on the golf course and the guy's got the house on the golf course and he's out sitting on the back porch and in his underwear smoking a cigar, and all he's doing is waiting for a ball to come in his yard so he can scream at somebody. And it's just like, dude, like, get a life, you know? So yes, it's work to get better, but it's good work, dude. It's good work. It's satisfying work. It's work to look forward to, you know? So I've never understood that choice. And I'm sure that some of it's circumstance. I'm sure that some of it's upbringing and demeanor. You know, some people are just angrier than other people. Some people are just more easily annoyed than other people. But I think
isn't it amazing though that when you meet somebody, you, even when they walk into the room, right, you can feel the energy. And sometimes it's hard to know because, again, just the way you look and the way you are, it could be different. But it doesn't take very much time to know. Even a couple exchange of eye contact, you have a conversation, and then then all of a sudden there's a connection, and you've created this this energy, positive energy. If you have negative energy, everybody will just avoid you. You can just feel it. It's like nature knows. It's this aura that you carry, and you're either really drawn to it, like there's like this attraction to that person, or there's the opposite. You know, you're repelled. You're pushing back, and you don't want anything to do with them.
Well, the other thing that strikes me is that, you know, I would consider both you and I to be confident men that generally speaking, like each other. And I have a tendency,
not overconfident, because that's what humility does. But you're right. You have to have some confidence. But I'm sorry to interrupt you, please.
No. I think that my point was going to be that I have to remind myself, because I come in usually guns blazing, right? I'm not shy. I'm big. I am loud. I like to hear myself talk.
No, you're kidding me.
But
I'm
I
just
love,
giving you a hard time.
I know, but I love sharing stories with people. I love
Yeah.
getting to know people but one at a time, not necessarily a whole crowd, but
Yeah.
I have to be careful with my proximity to the person, because if the person's smaller than I am, I can be intimidating just
Oh,
by
interesting.
standing there.
Yeah,
This is
yeah,
just,
yeah. You
we
don't
all have,
realize it, but you're intimidating, and they're afraid. They're putting a shield up to protect
yes.
themselves, even though you're not an immediate threat.
Yeah, I'm not coming
Interesting.
in to punch you. I'm coming in for a hug.
Yeah,
But you don't
but they
know
don't
me
know
from
that.
Adam.
Yeah,
That's right.
yeah,
They don't know me yet.
yeah,
Right. So it's like I have to ease into those kinds of things. But I've
yeah,
had a couple of people tell me before in a positive fashion, dude, you bring a really strong positive energy into the
yeah,
room with you. And I'm like, well, thank you. I said that's a compliment that I'll take. But
yeah,
I was going to say about relationships, I think, because I'm reflecting on mine. So, I have a girlfriend now, 4 years. She's got kids. I got kids. We're both, 61 years old.
mhm,
So think of the things we don't have to worry about, right?
mhm,
We don't have to worry about kids. We don't have to worry about getting pregnant,
yeah,
right? We both have our own homes, right? And the topic of marriage, I think it's come up one time in
mhm,
passing.
mhm,
And I don't know, I can't put words in her mouth, but we have a good thing going. I told you my
yeah,
buddy asked her about a year ago, why do you guys not argue and get along so well? And she immediately said, well, we don't live together.
mhm.
So
Well,
I
yeah,
think
and
I
this
think it's
speaks to what I was saying earlier about what you just touched on was you're in a place in life, again, your own property, you have some security. You don't have that necessarily at 40 with kids in college, or in 30 or even 20. So I appreciate you saying that, because it's as much as being in the right place at the right time, and having some things set that young people, which is, I think, we can get into the worldviews of politics. I think it's still one of the greatest crimes we've ever put on a generation, and that's student debt, number one, right?
Mhm.
And even real estate. You've shared with you, your daughter's looking for places, how difficult it is. They're giving 30-40% of their income to housing. These are
Mhm.
kind of things too. I don't want to get off topic, but I appreciate what you're saying. You have some stability in your life that not everybody has.
Well,
Uh,
and we had a lot of common ground. Like she
mhm,
likes to be outdoors. I like to be outdoors. We
yeah,
both like yoga. We both like good food. We
mhm,
both like to laugh a lot. We both like music. There's a lot of commonality there, but I think most of it has to do with the ease with which we find ourselves at this point in life. I
mhm,
think the number one thing, bar none, in terms of a successful relationship is communication, because communication
mhm.
is something I didn't have with
Yep.
my wife, my ex-wife. She refused to talk about things about which we disagreed, and that just hangs out there, and it just festers and it gets worse. So when you say to your wife, or she says to you, "What's wrong, honey?" that has to open up a conversation. Maybe not right then and there, but you got to address that at some point, or it
Yeah.
becomes something it didn't need to become. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's my opinion on relationship coaching. You got to communicate about stuff, and sometimes you got to communicate about stuff you don't want to communicate about.
Hmm. Hmm.
You just don't want to. I got a girlfriend whose husband died 18 years ago, and what I've discovered is that that will always be there. Like,
Hmm.
it's not a topic I necessarily want to talk about,
Hmm.
except to be supportive of her, because
Hmm.
it comes with so much baggage,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
so much baggage. And
Yeah.
so it's just interesting. But I think that we communicate really well. We're almost always respectful. And when we're not, there's a quick apology that's sincere.
Hmm.
And apologies are not always sincere. You
Yeah.
know, I'm sorry, but is not an apology.
Yeah.
So I think what we ended up talking about here was a couple things. One was relationships, right? One was communication. Well, actually,
Yeah.
you started about this guy communicating a
Yeah.
really good question to you,
Yeah.
and then
We'll
your
talk. We start off
communication.
with parking.
Yeah.
Parking abilities and emotional intelligence. So
Well, there's so much, again, with the title of the podcast, The Imperfect Men's Club, there's so much
yeah.
imperfection that we've just discussed here. There's so many
Yeah.
opportunities to make
Yeah.
mistakes, but if you go in sincerely and you listen intently and you're kind and generous and grateful for the opportunity, that's pretty much always going to be a good time and a good conversation. You know, if you come in with an ulterior motive, or you come in pissed off about something else, or you come in distracted, you're just increasing the opportunities to make mistakes and
Yeah.
and show
Yeah,
your
the other
imperfections.
thing you mentioned, I think we started off the conversation again about death, and that's just happens to be the last 24 hours. Had that conversation with a couple very good friends. Either people died in their lives or about to fear dying. You know, that's when. But what I've decided to believe about death, because losing my father right before COVID in 2019, I read a book it's a known book. I don't remember the title right now, but the book is about the relationship with your an adult child after the death of their parent, because you really become somebody different. Like what the book, the premise of it on a very, very high level is, as long as that person's alive, you're subconsciously or unknowingly trying to please them in ways that you don't realize. But when they're gone like as in a death, you now are going to begin a new relationship with them. And that relationship could be very good or very bad. So I don't see death as bad in general. I see death as a new beginning and a celebration of life and kind of respect. So I can choose to believe one thing about my father or another thing. And I decided that, you know, we never had a bad relationship, but we weren't super close. But I've just, as the years go by, I become more and more grateful. One, that he died the way he did. So it was right before COVID. He didn't have to suffer very long. It was a lung condition. Also, the relationship with my mother and him was contentious. It was, you could see it was growing over time. This is reflecting back on marriage, right? And one of the greatest gifts he gave me was, one, to see some things that I want to make sure I don't repeat in my marriage. That was my answer to this question about what's the secret. I don't know if there's any secret about life, but yeah, I think when my father passed away, he gave us a gift. As much as, sure, we miss him. I'm speaking to my, you know, brothers and sisters and my mother. We miss him a lot, but he also gave us a lot of things he left behind, right? Financial security for my mother, and some things that I will do different in my marriage that he didn't do. And I think that's the way you celebrate his life, and you show that out of respect. And that's just how I choose to look at death. I think some people, unfortunately, with modern medicine, are kept alive way too long in horrible circumstances. And I even am now questioning modern medicine and how far have we come, when it's almost it's a torture machine, not to mention the financial drain of everything they work for their entire life. So it's a whole other topic, but that's
it is. And I tell you, just to kind of wrap this one up, if you will, and I'll put a title on it. A couple of are coming to mind, but I'm listening to you talk about your life and your marriage and your friends and your dad and your brothers and sisters and your kids. And all along the way, I don't even know that you recognize this. You're making choices. You're recognizing that all of these forks in the road, I don't have to just get caught up in a wave and pushed off this way. I can stop right here and say, I don't want to go that way.
That's right.
I want to go this way.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. I think you're right. It's a decision and it's a reflection. We all have that choice, right?
Exactly.
You shared it with me yourself. This is to grow bitter or better.
Yep.
You're the choice.
Yeah.
And,
no. So yeah, no, I enjoyed the format of this, Jim, and I think we got some interesting stuff out there and some things for people to reflect on, because this is not mathematical, it's not scientific, it's emotional, it's surreal on some level, it's subconscious on a lot of levels. But I think the conclusion of this whole thing is life is a choice, and we all have choices to make. And you can make bad ones or you can make good ones. And the people that make bad ones, and I've made some, we all have.
We all do. That's part of the process. It's what you learn by the mistake and try not to make it again.
Yep.
And then become a better person, a better father, a better husband, a better son, whatever, brother.
And the self accountability thing, I remember listening to Dennis Prager, the talk show host. He was interviewing a rabbi. I think I shared this story with you. And they were talking about marriage. They were talking about relationships, and the rabbi said something along the lines of, "No, a woman called in and said, you know, he just won't. He's not willing to do this. He won't do that. He's, you know, he won't talk about this. He won't." And the rabbi stopped and said, "You know, I think in a successful marriage, you have to come into the marriage and say, what can I do for you?"
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that's true in a sales call. That's true in the beginnings of a relationship. That's true in a friendship. What can I do for you? And then what's going to happen is the best in me is going to come out.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And if both parties come to the relationship looking for something from the other party, that makes it much more challenging. So I just thought that was a very interesting observation, and it knocked her. She didn't know what to say to the response. She's like, "Oh, I guess I am being selfish, aren't I?"
Yeah. Good stuff,
So,
Mark. We'll
all
wrap
right,
this
Jim.
one up.